All right. Good morning, Chairperson, members, Garrett Vollendroff, staff and guests. Lobbies are open. Recording has begun.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. We'll convene the Board Caucus meeting for Tuesday, July 30th, 2024. We've got a big substantive briefing on rules prep, and I'm going to just turn over the show to Cassidy West, our Policy and Rules Manager, to take us through it. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairperson and board members, Garrett and Vollendroff. So before we get into our preview of action items for tomorrow, I'll provide a brief update. So we will be posting the semi-annual rulemaking agenda on the website today, and that will include all of our rulemaking activity through the rest of the year. And just as a preview, we will have at the 8/14 board meeting, the CR 102 for the cannabis sampling. We will also have the CR 102 be presented for the cannabis waste. We will have the CR 101 initiating rulemaking for HB 2204, and that's regarding the emergency liquor permits rule. And we will also be presenting a response. Daniel will be presenting a response to a petition on social equity license mobility. We will have on the 28th of August a hearing for the medical cannabis excise tax. We will also be presenting, Denise will be presenting the 102 for the minors on premises. And so September 11th, this will be a follow-up to tomorrow's series of events where we will have the hearing for the social equity rulemaking, which Justin will be previewing today. We'll also have the hearing for the THC bill, which I'll get into in just a second. We will also be having the hearing for the cannabis payment flexibility, and I'll be providing that preview for Daniel today as well. And then we did receive a petition on July 16th from Joe's Transportation regarding a central hub for transporters. And that will be presented on September 11th. Jeff will be presenting that one. And then I'm just going to go ahead and go through the end of September to September 25th, because that will be the 103 for the cannabis payment flexibility will be filed at that time. We'll also file the CR 103 for the social equity, assuming the board approves it today and we do not have to do a supplemental. And then same thing for the THC bill. We'll have that 103 filed on the 25th of September. Cannabis waste, the hearing for cannabis waste will also be on September 25th. And then we will also file the 102 for House Bill 2151, transferring lab standards and accreditation standards from LCB to WSDA. So that's the rulemaking update for today. I hope that was clear. Are there any questions? Quite a bit of things coming up.
I don't see any at this point. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Would you like me to go ahead and go into the THC bill or preview, where I can do cannabis payment flexibility?
Whatever order you want to take them in is fine.
Okay.
You're in charge.
All right. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and provide Daniel's preview for tomorrow. He will be presenting we received a petition from Micah Sherman, as you all know, on to allow additional flexibility for wholesale cannabis payments. So this project is amending WAC 314-55-115 on the methods that cannabis licensees can use to purchase from other licensees. The CR 101 was filed on May 8th, and a survey was disseminated with draft rule language, and that was posted on the rules website. So the survey ran along with the draft language from June 3rd through July 8th. And the survey results indicated that the licensees who responded are generally supportive of the proposed rule changes. Daniel will provide more detailed survey results tomorrow during his presentation. The section WAC 314-55-115 identifies checks, prepaid accounts, debit or credit cards, electronic funds transfers, and using a money transmitter as methods that licensees can use to purchase cannabis from other licensees. The proposed rules change to clarify that, just like with other payment methods, the purchase order has to be done by an invoice. Both parties have to keep records consistent with LCB requirements, and the check has to be mailed no later than the next business day after the cannabis delivery. And it has to be deposited no later than 5 business days after it's been delivered. We only received one comment during the informal comment period through the 101, and it was related to the NSF checks. We already have, and that's not sufficient funds. We already have a provision in WAC 314-55-115 that addresses that. And so it just basically says that NSF issues have to be corrected by 3 p.m. on the business day if there are issues, if it's reported. Otherwise, it becomes impermissible and it is considered an extension of credit. Oh, that was a lot for Daniel. Any questions on that for now?
Quick one on the last thing you were just saying. Is it has to be fixed by 3 p.m. the day the NSF is notified?
It has to be corrected by 3 p.m. Corrected on 3 p.m. Yes. So they get the notification, and then by 3 p.m. that business day, it needs to be corrected. Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
We're good.
Questions about that? Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the THC bill. Alas. Okay. So tomorrow I'll be presenting the CR 102 to implement and grow second substitute Senate Bill 5367 regarding the regulation of products containing THC. As you all know, the legislation aimed to regulate the diverse THC cannabinoid products that proliferated following the 2018 Farm Bill. This rulemaking crucially does not intend to disrupt the existing I-502 licensed cannabis industry. And so I just want to make sure that that is very clear. This was to address the unregulated hemp market. So we held a series of public engagements. So extensive input has been incorporated from the surveys, the webinars, and the stakeholder discussions, ensuring that the rules are practical and enforceable. The proposed changes that we've made are, we made several updates to sections of WAC. These include new definitions, so WAC 314-55-010. We also revised the serving size limits to clarify the amount of THC that may be in a single serving. Now that the THC bill expands the definition of THC concentration to include a broader range of tetrahydrocannabinol compounds. We also revised the testing requirements in WAC 314-55-102 to clarify how to measure and report THC concentration. And we aligned the packaging and labeling rules accordingly as well with that, so that consumers have the transparent information that they need to be able to make informed decisions. We did an analysis regarding the economic impacts for businesses, and we determined that the cost will be minor based on the proposed rule changes that we have, avoiding significant burdens on businesses. So I will seek to the board's approval to file this tomorrow. And as I mentioned earlier, if approved tomorrow, the hearing will be on September 11th, and then we will present the 103 on the September 25th board meeting, which means the rules would become effective on October 26th. I do want to note that in looking at the OTS documents that we received, we're going to have to make some technical changes. The filing deadline for the CR 102 is August 6th. So we'll have some time, a little bit of buffer room to make some adjustments. You can expect to see technical changes predominantly in the numbering. Just wanted to point that out, since there were so many sections that were amended. And
Cassidy, when you said the cost to the businesses would be minor, what is that cost?
Sure. I can pull up the exact. So we applied the standard minor cost estimate, which is $2,000. And so this was below that amount. Give me just one moment.
And because we're only talking about the impact on 502 licensed stores, right?
Yes, yes,
Not
that's correct.
People we're trying to crack down on. Hopefully okay.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And so if you can give me just one moment,
Yep,
I
sure.
can pull that up. And apologies, I was not expecting to have to pull the numbers up.
You can send it to me later. I was just curious.
Okay, yes,
You can
it was
well.
it was well below the minor cost. And so
Okay.
so the any compliance burden that we would expect would be to the labeling cost. And the way that we've redefined total THC to include other tetrahydrocannabinols. However, I do want to emphasize that the limits that we've established in the draft rules should not require people to have to change their labels as they currently stand. So we do want to write the rules so that we're accounting for future innovation, and that we're also providing consumers with transparency. But that would be the only compliance burden that we would see with that. So I hope that helps. All right.
Any other questions on THC? No. Okay.
All right, great. I'll pass it to Justin, who's going to present the 102 for me on the social equity.
Okay, great. Thank you. Justin
you.
Horn, our Director of External Relations, will join us up here to take us through this one. Good morning.
Morning, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Bollendroff. So today I'm going to preview the ask for tomorrow. We're going to be asking for approval to file a CR 102 on social equity in cannabis based on the implementation of Senate Bill 5080. And so if approved tomorrow, there's going to be a formal public comment period open until the hearing, which I'm putting a kind of a qualifier in here. So we're listing it as September 10th. It can be on the 10th or the 11th that way. And so we were hoping to have some input from the three of you on what your preference would be. Because we have the public hearing for the THC bill on the same day, we could do on the 10th a public hearing during caucus or after caucus, since you're all convened together for the social equity. And so whatever the preference would be, if you want to have both public hearings on the same day, that's fine. We can still have it on the 11th. But we did list the 10th in case you prefer to have the public hearing the day before, just because of the length of time. I'm sure we'll get a lot of comments and feedback. So, all right. So this project is amending WAC 314.55.570, updating the regulations based on the statutory provisions of Senate Bill 5080. And so that would include areas around not only the social equity text, but also the rubric. When we're looking at the CR 101 was filed on November 8th. We did an initial survey of applicants, predominantly around House Bill 2870 applicants to understand their experience. And then we also contracted during this period of time with Whitney Economics to provide information on the thresholds that were required under Senate Bill 5080. We also conducted an additional survey in July, which we've been talking about for the last few weeks on the most updated draft set of rules. We had 73 respondents initially to the first survey around the 2870 applicant experience. We've received about 30 written comments during the informal comment period on this particular project. And then we also additionally we held engagement sessions on May 15th and May 22nd. One was hybrid and one was virtual only. The draft rules were publicly shared after that. We had done some rework based on the feedback. We publicly shared those and sent out another survey, and that survey ran from July 11th to July 18th. And as a result of that survey, we had 242 valid response, anonymous and valid responses. And so that is a really good showing for folks and bringing that forward. I'll be covering the survey in a little bit more details tomorrow. I'll be happy to answer some of the questions today on that. Predominantly, the changes in WAC 314, 55, 570, really around the qualifications to be a social equity applicant, updating it from the previous set of rules. Many of the updates include updating the scoring rubric and also which reflect the scoring or which reflect the survey feedback. And then we also have a number of definitions that are changing based on the statutory provisions. And so we have things like the disproportionately impacted area, social equity plan, aligning those with statute, updating the definitions around family members, median household income, et cetera. And so I'll cover all of those in the ask tomorrow. We have a number of different processes that have changed that we've established in rule. One of the most important ones, well, it's the most important, but as far as the impact to new applicants is you'll have to register only to be able to get your first initial screening by the third-party vendor instead of actually applying for the license through other means such as going through the Secretary of State to get your business in order, Department of Revenue. This particular process update will allow you to register without having the fees and all of the formal paperwork there. You'll have to still submit some paperwork to be evaluated by a third-party vendor, but you don't actually become an applicant until later in the process after the scoring occurs. And so this should reduce some of the barriers to entry for folks to be able to become what we're going to be calling a registrant. This will also be having some updates to the mobility requirements that we found in 2870 and also for title certificate holders. We'll be talking about, we've also established appeal rights. We're trying to make that clear within this particular rule set because it was absent before. We had it in other areas, however, we wanted to make sure that it was kind of front and center for the transparency's sake. We're also doing modifying the updates around household income to really match up with the U.S. Census Bureau, which also matches up with our DIA assessments, including local jurisdiction objections based on Senate Bill 5080. We're also building in a conflict of interest provision within the context. And so if it is identified that there's a conflict of interest between an applicant and the third-party vendor, there would be an opportunity for the board to assess that and take action for the qualifications of the license. And so we heard some feedback that indicated we want to make sure that there's separation. And so we're building in that conflict of interest component. So if there was a conflict of interest, the potential applicant could either get denied, or if you get your license, it could be revoked if we find that that conflict of interest was present between the vendor and the applicants. We're also going to be publishing online the results of the threshold analysis by Whitney Economics. And just as a high level kind of view, it projected out to 2032 of retail applicants. And so we're expecting to see growth in the industry, but currently there wouldn't necessarily be what they would deem as a lot of viability for additional licenses. Now, with the passage of the medical excise tax exemption, the more product coming in, we're going to see more potential patients coming into the market, and more people will be entering the legal market. So therefore, the demand for licenses will also be increasing, and that's kind of calculated but they didn't talk about the near term more than the longer term. And so that'll be there. But on the producer and processor side, production, we have the capacity for overproduction. It doesn't mean that it's automatically happening right now, but the amount of space that's been licensed would be over capacity. So what we're trying to project in these thresholds, because when we look at a threshold, it's not necessarily the maximum number of licenses that would be afforded in each county, but we took a look at, what would this look like from almost a minimum threshold type of a stance. And the producer licenses would be the most challenging if you were to be interested in acquiring a producer license because of the availability of grow or the plant canopy currently in the state of Washington. And we just want people to be aware of what that is so they can make an informed business decision if they so choose to apply for one of those licenses. The processor license was actually projected to be of the most demand and growth potential within the industry. Predominantly, I think when you're looking at people coming into the marketplace around the medical cannabis provisions as well, you're going to have more demand for different type of processing and products. And so I think that that really spoke in this particular analysis. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, I'll go into a lot more detail tomorrow in some of the findings from the survey, as well as some detail on numbers from the Whitney economics standpoint.
Member Volendroff?
Justin, thank you for that update. And I'm impressed with the level of community engagement that we've had in this process. I think we're better as a result of that. So I wanted to acknowledge that and then acknowledge the work that the staff have put into this. It's been a lot of work and I really appreciate the effort. I have a question about the conflict of interest, and maybe you said this. If there's a conflict of interest, like who determines that there is a conflict of interest? And then the second part of that question is, can you give an example of what might be considered a conflict of interest in this case, in this example?
I think the most the easiest example to provide in this would be if the vendor somehow had an investment into one of the applicant's businesses. Either they're providing money or there's some sort of favoritism that occurred based on a financial interest or gain out of the process. And so that would be something that the board or the LCB would be determining if that were to come to light. And so the vendor wouldn't actually be the one assessing that. But we want to make sure that if there's any type of allegation of that type of conflict, that we have something in our regulations to be able to look at that more closely and have some way to remedy that. Which we didn't have before. And so we don't want to be put in a position where we're going to have a difficult time trying to address something. And so that's why we're putting that in there as well.
Can I follow up on that point? You mentioned, one of the possible cures is revocation, but what about avoiding it? What if we announce that it's, third-party vendor is my family and I still want to apply? Is there a process where somebody could be registrant and handled in a different way to avoid that conflict?
I would think if you have like family ties, for example, I think you could be, and this isn't detailed in the regulation, but you could certainly be upfront about that. Just like you have a lot of different conflict of interest disclosures in a number of different areas. Folks are coming out and saying, hey, this is what there is. And being very transparent about that. I think that alleviates the risk around that. But if we, find that there is some sort of a preferential treatment based on that conflict of interest between them, that's where the remedy.
We were unaware of.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Other questions from Justin?
So the last comment. Go ahead.
I got a couple.
Oh, good.
Okay. I got a couple. The Whitney report is fascinating to me, and actually I would like us to find time to have a session just on that. If you can have your folks and maybe the Whitney folks come, because it gets into everything we do here. Yep. Came through this alley here of looking at social equity, but boy, it's fascinating. So one of the questions, and you referenced the sort of difficulty on the production side of the business. Do we as an agency have the ability to restrict the number of producer license? I know there was a thing in the bill that added production and producers, but can we say, we've looked at this data and we think we should hold back some of the producer licenses for X, or do we have to just open it wide to everybody?
So I think, we don't have an open window for applications right now. So if that didn't occur, then people wouldn't be able to apply. They can always assume licenses that are out there. Based on the statutory provisions in Senate Bill 5080, I think we would have to open that window for a period of time because it did call out 10 different producer licenses. And so that's why when we looked at this, instead of saying, no, we're not going to have the opportunity, just to make folks abundantly clear on what the landscape looks like, so you can make an informed decision. And keep in mind, you could be somebody who comes in with a really good business plan and be very successful, whereas maybe current licensees aren't very successful because of how their business plans are established. So I wouldn't want to say it can't be done, but at the same time, the amount of plant canopy growth that's been licensed in the state would be challenging for somebody to come in and try to add to that and then get a place in the market. And so that's the most challenging area. Doesn't mean people shouldn't apply for that, but it should be something that folks are well informed of instead of thinking that there's an opportunity because the statute called out that we're going to issue 10.
Right.
So I think that we want to make sure that there's not a sense of automatic success because the statute called something out.
Yeah. So, and Whitney went as far as say, do not, the recommendation, do not issue additional producer license until the supply capacity is more in line with the demand. So to your point, I think, again, underlines, let's just have a session about that study, get that information out there as much as we can. Because I think current licensees and potential registrants and applicants would get a lot out of seeing what's in there. It gives you a snapshot of the industry in a way that we haven't seen, I don't think. So appreciate that. Also want to say, I agree with Member Voldrov. I think it's a great product. A lot of work went into it. It won't have everything in it that everybody recommended. Certainly doesn't have everything I did. But I think it's a consensus package that'll get us there. But I think, one of the other things that's underlined in both our own stakeholder work and again in Whitney is the importance of kind of almost the soft skills, if you will. Like we can make corrections in the rules and the rubric, which we've done, but there's the things there that people talked about how difficult it was to obtain documents. Number one, we've addressed that, I think, with the way we look at that. I think that's really good. But number two was understanding why their application was withdrawn. Hard to address that in rule in a way, but to me, there's a really clear message that we need to do more there. And then the third one was just getting questions answered by the LCB. And I think that's another thing where that's just kind of on us all. We can't say it, and I don't know how one would say that in the rules, but we just have to understand that people had a lot of people had a difficulty understanding. And then you can see in the survey, which is understandable and maybe predictable, if you got a license, you thought the process was easier to understand than if you didn't get, but some of those people who got it hired lawyers, to do it. And I wish that wasn't necessary really to make that distinction. So I just think it really underlines the need for us to help people, another line from that study, better understand with respect to LCB rules and instructions. Just to be clear, we hire a third-party vendor to assure the unbiased decision-making you're talking about. Doesn't mean we just have to sit mum and not answer questions. People still come to us and have that expectation. So I don't know how we do that, write it in, but I want to draw a line.
Yeah, I think in response, we have built in a few more processes within this rule set. And so there's some added transparency in that respect. I think that the rule set will also help govern how the RFP requirements would come out. So, the rules don't necessarily govern a non-licensed entity like a third-party contractor. However, we can point to the rule set now and say, this is how the process needs to work. And so it's not, there's still the ability of neutrality for that third-party vendor, but we can put some additional parameters so that things can work a little bit more in line with a transparent process. And so I think that's been built into this rule set as well.
The other thing that comes through really clear in Whitney is that they talk about connecting the opportunity for growth the opportunity for new entrants into the industry, how important that is to the work that goes on to build the legal market versus the illicit market. Like they're clear. The more people go to the illicit market, the less opportunity we have to broaden this industry. And it it goes back even to the THC bill that we were talking about earlier. And what do we do to stop the illegal? I think hemp derived THC market out there. So it's just an interesting kind of through line there about all the enforcement work, all the regulatory work we do does have an impact directly on the opportunity for a more diverse industry. And we have to worry about that, I think, from all those different angles. So anyhow, I do hope we can get a briefing on that. I think that was, you addressed one of the other things. On the question about the registration, that was the one part of the memo I had a hard time with. You explained it well to me, but the way we wrote it made it sound like we're adding something. Registration is required before submitting documents to the contractor, but then it goes on to say to reduce barriers to entry. So again, we just really, so I guess the last thing I would say, if I could just, I hope your team will work with communications as much as possible, and Jim Weatherly too, on how we communicate, and just let's really lean into plain talking and making it clear, because I want to understand it and I want other people to. But
yeah, it's an awkward dynamic when you have to mandate something, because how are we going to know who the registrants are if we don't mandate how you apply? So you have to do this online window. However, we're alleviating a lot of the requirements that you would have normally had in an application until later in the process when you are deemed a social equity applicant. And so, yeah, it's I think that the communication piece is going to be really important, so folks can understand what that looks like coming through. And even in our open public forum, that was a question that folks had is, okay, what does this mean to be a registrant versus an applicant?
Right.
And so it's just a different part of the process. And so you haven't actually applied with everything that you have. Like, for example, your corporation or your limited partnership or something, it doesn't have to be established right away. So that's why you're the registrant versus an actual applicant, because we don't.
It's a much better way entry, I think. But I think there was a lot of confusion on the part of me as well. Just in we had, you apply, you qualify, you become an applicant, you get a license, and people are getting all these different letters, and it was hard to sort of keep track of that. So I just think we can help people be really clear about that. Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
You bet. And so to your point on the changes within the rule set, I would like to comment that our team that was dealing with crafting the regulations and the rubric around social equity, they put a lot of thought into this. I think they did a really nice job in exploring this. And once the survey with the 240 plus respondents came back, a lot of that was heavily considered within this, trying to figure out, and quite frankly, as I'll cover tomorrow, a lot of it was split. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, what is meeting the interest of the stakeholders, and not everything even that folks internally thought would have been a benefit is in there because of the responses and there's how we're adopting that stakeholder feedback. So, I think it's really important to be able to call that out, because we're not putting everything in that we thought was necessarily the best viable, that, we're not representing what they think from the community, and we're adopting what the community believe.
But how do you, and the APA doesn't, say it's a vote,
Yeah.
but we get a lot, and I would say now with social equity, we probably have had more stakeholder input than any other issue that I remember here through the meetings you held and survey and everything. Do you think that at this point, do you have a way to sort of characterize, have we addressed most of the concerns that were raised by stakeholders?
So we are addressing the concerns that were raised. It doesn't necessarily mean that the result will be what everybody wanted. Like I said, it's pretty split. And so we had to do some evaluations on what that looks like. And so I think, quite frankly, because of the split nature of the survey responses, you're going to have a number of folks that will be pleased. You'll have a number of folks that aren't going to be pleased. But, in trying to balancing the best interest of all the parties involved, I think that was an important thing to look at. And as an example, so when we were starting to kind of get into some of the details, when we look at the overall survey responses, we had a number of folks who were identifying themselves as members of a marginalized community. For example, 56% of all of them, all the respondents had looked at that. But then when we broke it down a little bit further on who, taking out people who said, no, I'm not applying for a license. Right. They've already decided that. The representation rate of that goes up to 69%. So we took a look at the subsets of who's interested in applying as well as the overall total, and tried to figure out how do we balance those folks who are going to be utilizing the program as well. So those were some of the discussions, and I think that was important to look at. And so we'll be able to bring forth some of those data points for you.
Having the research team engaged in this was super helpful.
Yeah.
It just really showed the value.
Yeah, really proud of them.
Appreciate that. It was great. The other thing that came up in Whitney, just that I think we also need to talk about internally and keep talking about externally as well, is talk about the need to incentivize consumers to participate legally, not in the illicit market. But then they say licensee health is equally as important at incentivizing consumer legal participation, which means it's in the interest of this whole ecosystem to make sure that licensees survive out there. And Whitney talks about where that minimum, the threshold for economic viability is. And it's tough business, clearly. But we do have an interest as regulators to do what we can to get these licensees to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that speaks to the points that Cassidy was raising in the THC provisions as well, because one of the things that we really tried to focus on, and we heard from, there was a lot of ideas that initially came out, and we were trying to meet all these different interest points, and it got really complicated. And so we heard from folks, we scaled that back, and we really focused on, okay, the bill was intended to eliminate that unregulated market, youth access, et cetera. And it did that for the most part. I mean, we still have internet sales and the like that are going on, but overall, I think it served its purpose there, but the purpose wasn't to add regulation to licensees. So we took a look at what does the current state look like, and how do we utilize the new definitions in statute, and then build those into our program. That's why we made some of the changes there, so that we could keep it more on status quo. Around Delta-9 THC, for example, instead of having to try to figure out new formulas and bring everything in, we looked at what's out there. We looked at COAs and we said, okay, this is what the current state is, because naturally occurring Delta-8 is there. So we're not saying that can't be in there. Right. And so we really tried to maneuver the language in that bill to have that lower impact for the health of the industry. So I think that that was really important to look at.
Well, then one of the other briefings that I know we have coming up with enforcement is to talk about what have we done outside the 502 market since that bill passed. Yep. Because we're doing a lot. We're getting there. But boy, that bill, I think, probably the most complicated thing I've seen.
Yeah. So just to reiterate on the social equity front, if the board approves the CR 102 tomorrow, that formal public comment period will be until September 10th or 11th. And then if the rules move forward, if there were no changes or a supplemental 102 wasn't need to be filed, those would be filed on September 25th, and then they would become effective on October 26th. And so just wanted to highlight the timeline that's also incorporated with this particular rule project.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Justin on this?
I just have one more comment. So earlier I talked about the value of having community engagement. And again, that's so helpful. And as Justin, you mentioned, it's not about getting consensus. It's about listening to everybody and making sure we're paying attention to diverse opinions and positions that people have. And then I mentioned the staff. David, you helped me out by acknowledging the research team. I also was going to just acknowledge the value of having the research team involved in this. And then finally, I wanted to acknowledge Member Garrett and your participation in this. I think that your expertise and background and experience adds a lot of credibility to the process. And so just wanted to thank you for your work on this.
Absolutely. No more questions. On another subject, though, could you just give everybody a reminder about your webinar yesterday on the tax exemption piece?
Certainly. So over the last month, we've provided a couple different guidance documents, working with the other divisions who were super helpful in putting all of that together. And so yesterday, we
Just
just,
to be clear, we're talking about the medical exemption.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, so the 37% excise tax exemption topic, we had put out some guidance on, how to approach this, what are the responsibilities, who's liable, those types of things. And because it's different than the sales and use tax approach, we really wanted to make sure that there was clarity. So after those guidance documents came out, we did hold a session yesterday. It was scheduled for an hour virtual session. We had around 60 plus people from outside of the organization attend. We had a few questions. We did a 15-minute presentation, and then just another 20 minutes is all for questions and answers, because there were no more questions after that. So we ended it early, but it is posted online. If folks are interested, if you missed that opportunity to look at that Q&A session, you'll be able to find that on our website.
That's good. Okay, thank you. And thanks for doing that session. Okay, that brings us to the last time, which is board member and executive assistant reports. Anything to add before we adjourn today?
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Jeff
hold
is
on.
actually going to be presenting tomorrow, a 103 for the
Right.
acronym name change. So
Yeah.
I just want to make
Yes,
sure
sorry,
that's
Jeff.
on the schedule. Thank you.
Apologies, yeah.
Okay,
Let's do that.
okay, yeah. Good morning, Chair Postman and Board Member Garrett and Board Member Volendroff. At tomorrow's board meeting, I will request the board's approval to file a CR 103 notice of permanent rulemaking to amend several sections in Title 314 WAC. This rulemaking was done through expedited rulemaking to update the former name of this agency from Liquor Control Board to the official name now, Liquor and Cannabis Board, as it was changed in 2015. And also in this rulemaking, it updates the acronym used for this agency from WSLCB to LCB for consistency. So tomorrow, if the CR 103 is approved, the permanent changes will take effect on August 31st, 2024. We haven't received any public comment on these changes. However, the rulemaking will include a fewer sections from the original CR 105 because those sections are involved in other ongoing rulemaking. So that's all I have today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any questions. Thanks, Mr. Kildall. Sorry I skipped you there.
Well, thank you, sir.
See you tomorrow. Okay. With that, board members have anything to add? Nothing? Okay. We'll adjourn. We'll be back tomorrow at 10 for a board meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Yes. Yep. So when you guys, I
think we should do the hearings on the same day.
okay, that's